You will.
Praise be Jesus Christ.
Now
And forever. There's somebody. Now and forever. I've been doing a lot of baptisms over the years, as you just discovered. I don't want to call this a class today, but more of a sharing of my experiences. I've had a lot of experiences, and also for you to, at any time, involve yourself in this, and let's make it a conversation, okay? So if there's something, I'm here to prepare you for as many surprises as I can possibly think of, and that's where I'm at, okay? And I've had a lot of surprises over the years. I have some, look at my outline. I have some I have some pamphlets, some papers to hand out. One of them is just kind of a small little outline of the day. The second one is a baptismal registration form. And the third one is something that someone gave me a while back off the internet, and it's about infant baptism in the Catholic Church and the way in which we see infant baptism in the Catholic Church to be able to discuss with our fundamentalist friends when they look at you and say, we don't baptize babies. You will have some in that pamphlet, which is pretty thick, what, about 5 pages or something? Front and back. There's all kinds of scriptural references. So I just brought that for you guys to have as your own reference to keep. I think that's really important. When I got it, I loved it. I hadn't seen it in such a context before. So my personal preference is that I hand them all out to you now, and then I'm going to be quiet and let you look through them. Because if I continue to talk, you'll be looking at the papers. So I want you to look at the papers first, and then I'll just be quiet. And that way, when we're done, we can set the papers out of the way, and I'll go through them in our talk together, okay?
And you don't give these to the parent. I found out the hard way. I had to go chase them down.
Oh, you get the...
Hmm?
Oh, here's the two.
No, that's money. Ha ha.
All set, man?
It's gonna be a long day.
Private rooms can be
I got an extra outline for the class.
You may or may not, maybe it's something you want to write on. I just wanted to give you a little synopsis kind of thing. little more paper, I was a little more cautious with how much I use. Oh, okay, all right. Well, here, okay. I have,
You need it for your thing.
well, yeah, but I've got a master here. I don't, are you gonna listen, or are you gonna be able to go away and copy? Here's a master that I don't wanna write on. I wrote on one copy for me. Would that work for you now?
Oh, we got that. That was this one.
Oh, okay, oh, you're right. Oh, okay.
I'll just take it
I
later.
got a master here somewhere. The mustache.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, it's just that mine's marked up. Oh, yes, I do. I do have a master, if you want. If, I don't know when you plan on doing it, but this one, because I marked it the other one, if you use that one, we have my marks and scribbles all over the place. That one I leave clean. Well, I don't want you to study it thoroughly, but just get a kind of a breeze of what it's saying in there. Because I know we're supposed to be in this 1 hour segment. Did you find that infant thing pretty interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. It really, I have a, you guys know I'm a snowbird, and I'll be in Florida in another 5 weeks. And I have a real good Baptist friend that sometimes we fish together, but we regularly play golf together. And the kind of the face I gave you earlier, he's even done it in the fishing boat, is to say, Mike, we don't baptize babies. I hear it all the time from my Baptist friend. And it seems to be his biggest hurdle. So this, I hope, helps when you run into friends like mine. But it's always in love. We know what Pope Francis is talking about, all mercy and love. So if there's a way you might help them say, well, yeah, I see where you're coming from, because this is how you look at it. However, this is how we look at it. This is how we understand baptism. So you're kind of explaining to them, not correcting them. You know?
Is he stuck on the idea that it's a sacrament, or is he stuck on?
Well, the only right for Christian faith is Baptist. That's where he's at. That's where he's at. And he's told me, and I've impressed him, maybe I've changed his tune a little bit, because he's seen how I live my life. And you guys have heard it too. I haven't seen any Catholics. It's usually, a lot of us tend to give that example of drinking on Friday night and making sure you get to confession Saturday before Mass. At least that's what I've experienced, is that kind of attitude from our other brothers and sisters of other faiths. They just see that kind of Catholic Christian and no other. And we know that's not the truth. Any questions, comments? Okay, then what I'd like to do, then, like I say, I handed these out so they wouldn't be a distraction. But I'll bring them up as we go through our experience together today, okay? And I want to start in this way because the diaconate is very dear and intimate to me. And so I want to just open myself to a little bit of my love to the diaconate, to you guys, who probably, I don't know the right words to choose. I heard Jane a minute ago, possibly will be ordained a deacon, in another year. So, I want to start with a story. Dave may know, he's heard me preach a bit. I like stories, and so I like to introduce with a story. So I'd like to share this story with you. It's called Ears to Hear. It was high noon in Manhattan, and the streets were, as usual, buzzing with crowds, cars, taxis, horns blowing, brakes screeching, sirens wailing. Two men were making their way together through the crowd. One was a native New Yorker, and the other a visiting farmer from Kansas. Suddenly the farmer stopped in his tracks. "Hold on," he said. "I hear a cricket." His friend replied, "Are you crazy? Are you kidding? Even if there was a cricket around here, which probably isn't likely, you'd never be able to hear it all over all this noise anyhow." The farmer remained quiet for a few moments. Then he walked several paces to the corner where a bush was growing in a large cement planter. He turned several leaves over and found the cricket. The city man was flabbergasted. "What great ears you have." He said, "No. It's a matter of what you've been conditioned to listen for. Look, I'll show you." With that, he pulled a handful of coins from his pocket and let them drop to the sidewalk. As if on signal, every head on the block turned. "You see," said the farmer, "you hear what you want to hear. It's a matter of what you're listening for." I have discovered in the ministry that Jesus has given me, that seems to be key gift of His grace is to listen. And I think it's very important that we learn to do that as deacons, is to listen, to hear what people are saying when we visit. A deacon is called to service. You'll be in the hospital, you'll be in the jail, you'll be in a nursing home, or maybe somebody that's released from prison will come talk to you. It's not always what they say, but what they don't say. It's about getting really quiet, and getting quiet within yourself and hearing it all. And it's interesting to note that if you take the word listen and silent, they're exactly the same letters, but they're moved around. So in order to listen, you must be silent inside. A couple of weeks ago, I visited a woman at the hospital, making rounds to several of them. And Robin Williams' movie where he played the doctor, the clown doctor.
Patch Adams?
Patch Adams, yeah. Yeah, you know how he put that nose on and all that stuff? I knocked on the door, and she said, "Come on in." And she was doing just like Patch Adams. She was just being very jolly and happy, and I thought, well, what is this, a clown? Or I wasn't sure what was going on. And I listened for a minute, and then she said, "I came in here because I didn't feel well, and they just told me I have stage 4 cancer, pancreatic cancer, and I think I'm going to die." And it stopped me in my tracks. It did. What she was saying was what? I'm going to laugh and joke about this, you know, but there was an underlying thing, and before long she opened up to me and she was crying. So I just want to invite you guys just to try and remember to listen, to silent yourself, listen and silent being the same letters. I think it's really important for me, and it can be a gift to all of us. The plan today is to just take you through my classes and how I meet the couples, go through the paperwork, and then later on I'll go through the how I prepare for the baptism itself, and then I think we're going to do one this afternoon. So one thing I should say is I can't remember if it was our second or third child, but I went to a baptism class as a father, and the class had 15 couples in it, something like that, and it's quite a formal class. And I don't think I really got much from it, and well, for Teresa and I's sake, it wasn't a problem. We don't have any kind of little problems with our marriage in the way of needing a convalidation or whatever it may be. And I tried one of those large classes, and I only did 2. Now, I don't know what your pastors in your churches do, if they do a large class, or if they're doing it individually. But for me, in now 19 years of doing these. I find only meeting on one-on-one is the best. I've discovered marriages that need to be straightened around. I've found godparents that don't work out, all kinds of discoveries, and even a lot of questions about the Catholic faith. And so for me, I like the class when I meet with them. I get a video on the show. We talk a little bit, get to know one another. We fill out the paperwork, and then we work on any kind of questions they might have, and talk about a potential schedule of the baptism, and I say potential. So that's basically what it looks like, and then I get that scheduled, and we do the baptism. You've been to some of those with me, haven't you, Tim? One? Yeah. Yeah.
How many good classes do you have? I mean, is it just?
Well, it's like I say, I'm retired. I meet to their convenience. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, all the time, you're talking to a young couple. And that means that one or both of them have a job, they're working. So, and I can't have a 3 o'clock in the afternoon class with all of them, maybe 1 or 2 if they work the evening shift, and then other times. So I make a lot of appointments on weekends or evenings. And I used to live a lot further away from my church, but now it's only a mile away. So it's not that much of an inconvenience to pop on down there. Sometimes it's good to get a little exercise and walk down there. Only a mile. So let's head into it then. Let's head into that. Are there any questions at this point? I'm always open to questions. So I make individual appointments. I like to meet with the parents, and I encourage the godparents to come. And as I work through this, you'll see why. It doesn't happen that often that the godparents come, but they have. So, I meet with them. We get to know each other. There's the introductions, because well, the church that I used to be in had like 1,500 families registered, so I didn't know all their names and faces together. Now it's only 500, and I'm learning now. I've only been there for a couple of years. The first thing I like to do is just say, what kind of questions do you have for me? What are you looking for? What are your expectations? And I've gotten all kinds. I think the most common answer or question is about godparents. Who can be a godparent? And the other one, of course, is the scheduling. They want it done as soon as possible, usually. And I've got to caution them on that, because not so much with the small church I'm in now, but when I was at St. Joseph's in Battle Creek, there's a lot of activities going on there. And I had to make sure with the secretary that the church was even available, because the font is in the church. And if the church isn't available, then I can't do the baptism. So that was a biggie. I would never make a promise. Have you guys done any of the paperwork? Maybe I'm jumping ahead. Yeah, why don't I wait? So that's part of it, is to make sure that when I schedule the baptism, I've made all the arrangements ahead of time to know that it's available. I don't know, what kind of questions? Did I write something down
Steve, Mike, could you give us some of the off-the-wall kind of crazy questions that some of those parents might be asking? Something that we might be prepared for that might be a surprise?
I think the biggest surprise I had at a meeting wasn't a question, but when I asked the question. And it was an older form. It's not the form that you guys have in front of you now. It had on it, has your child ever been baptized? And the mother was a Baptist, and the father was a Catholic. And when I said, has your child ever been baptized, or anyone attempted baptism with your child? She immediately jumped out, no. And his head went down like this, and he mumbles, yes. They disagreed over infant baptism, or waiting until you want to say, Jesus is my personal Savior. That's the baptism. So what happened is she went to work, and he headed off into the kitchen. baptized his baby. That was the biggest surprise I had.
Wow.
So,
So how do you deal with it?
well, I explained to them all about baptism in the Catholic Church and how it's only done once, and I had to do a conditional baptism in case he didn't do the formula right. And what's the formula? Let me just pop that out to you. You know the formula to that, guys? What is it? Somebody just speak up.
Baptize you in name.
Name, you gotta say.
Yeah, in the name.
Son, Father, Spirit, right. And I'm not sure if he knew what he was doing, so it had to be a conditional baptism. Other
So
strange,
that's to make sure that it was done.
yeah, right. And what you find in emergency cases, a lot of times babies are baptized in the hospital. If the baby is born and a little ill or something, the nurse or the doctor may do something. So, and still, for record, we have to baptize them conditionally. And that way it's put on the record, and the conditional baptism is on the record. Right, John? Yeah.
Do you make note of those conditions?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, I'm
like
gonna
we
have to- yes.
suspect that maybe about this date by this
You're
person?
getting into the form, well, this form doesn't have that. This is the new form, so it isn't a problem now.
Would you generally just make a
Yeah,
handwritten
a little
note
note
to
there,
attach
I
to
did,
it,
if I
something?
remember, that was a long time ago, I think I just put in parentheses, conditional baptism. But if that comes up in the conversation, that might be something really important, is to just bring up in conversation. I know it's not on the paper, but something to think about.
Or you need to finish the baptisms at the church, no?
Yes, at church, in the baptismal font. You're doing the baptism exactly the same, except that you say, instead of saying, Brian, I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, I say, Brian, on the condition you have been baptized, I baptize you. Now, on the condition you have not been baptized, I now baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy
But you
Spirit.
need to repeat the baptism,
Yes.
not finish the baptism with.
No, finish. You do the whole thing.
Oh,
Todos. Okay? Everything.
The other question that I have multiple times and asked, why the good parents need to be married?
Why they have to be married?
Yeah.
If you tell your child, your father, right? If you've told your father to, or you told your children to do something, and then you don't do it, how well do they listen? If you do what you tell them to do, they listen better. Explain that to the parents. You're talking about a Catholic sacrament and the grace that comes through that sacrament. They're not living their faith. They're not living their baptism. You need to encourage them to give an example. You see, it's about them and their role they play too. There's the obligations. That's the thing I talk about in class too. The obligations of the parent and the obligations of the godparent.
Yeah, because where 90% of the parents are not married.
Yeah.
We need to force.
And you're speaking of a Hispanic?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I work with the Hispanics, like you know, Dave, a lot at St. Joseph's, and yeah, there's some complications there.
Yeah.
There was also many Burmese there, and this is another part. The Burmese, many of them have escaped from Myanmar, Burma. There's a lot of persecution going on with Christians in Burma right now. And I know when it came to the baptism of one father and their marriage, we couldn't find any paperwork because of the persecution. They would just baptize and they would marry, and it'd have to be with closed doors and keep no paperwork around. And I actually, by the time I worked through all that with my pastor and everything, I had to call up our judge, Monsignor Tom Martin, and talk to him about what to do. Because there was no evidence of any baptisms or any marriages. And he said, take them at their word. Take them at their word. So there's a lot of complications. Maybe they have escaped their country, or they're not here legally. And to get married and have paperwork creates problems, doesn't it? So you will experience that in the Spanish-speaking community, I'm sure. Yeah, all the migrants. Yeah, I have experienced that as well.
And that's our case at St. Joseph, in Kalamazoo, the others.
Yeah.
And we actually have it's not only an issue with baptism, but now we are, backing up, we do have to call Monsignor Barton a lot and get, dispensations started and things like that, and the bishop signs off on them. But another issue we deal with is not just baptism, but with older children who are going through RCIA and they're receiving all the sacraments of initiation, and we have unmarried parents. We're dealing with a case right now where the father is from Mexico, but the mother is from Taiwan. She's Buddhist, he's Catholic, and they're not married. In the Catholic Church, they don't have a sacramental marriage. And so we have to go through a ton of paperwork with the bishop in order to get the boys confirmed. He doesn't even care. The dad and mother are fine, but to get the boys confirmed, we have to do so much paperwork. It's mind-blowing.
Well, the thing I see in meeting young couples is children grow up to a certain age of majority, with their parents' faith. What child has his own faith? There's very, very few. We met a couple of priests that said they felt the Lord call them when I was 8 years old or 7 years old. But most of us, it's our parents' faith. And then this couple, the man and woman, when they're separate, move away, go to college or into the service. A lot of times it's party hardy, or whatever. Right? The college is, it's about not going to Mass anymore. Then they get married and they come to church to get married to receive the sacrament of marriage. They have children and they come for their children to receive the sacrament of baptism. It's an opportunity right there. They're coming to us and they're ready, they're ripe for us to bring them up into their own faith and to help and nurture their faith. This is our call, to bring them in, because it's an opportunity. Whatever the difficulties, whether they're migrated here legally, illegally, and those are incorrect words. I don't like the word illegal. But no matter how they come in or what they've experienced by going away in the military, overseas or whatever, it's an opportunity for them to develop their own faith instead of mom and dad's. So we look at it, no matter what the challenges are, to bring them into that, and encourage them. How do I do that? Well, I ask them questions. After they've asked me all their questions and I tried to answer them to the best of my ability, I say, I'd like you to take a moment and let's reflect, and I'm going to ask you 2 questions. I want you to respond to me in this way. You tell me regular, occasional, seldom, or never. You choose one. And then I say, tell me your Mass attendance. Regular, occasional, seldom, never. And then I say, how about your prayer life? Same way. Regular, occasional, whatever. And from there, I got a feel from where they're at. And that helps me into the conversation. And a lot of times, it's probably the majority of times it's either occasional or seldom. I find the great couple a lot where it's regular, some of them, and those are the easy ones. Then there's others that are never. So, and that helps me to launch into the conversation too. Another thing is when I see that they're a mixed marriage, one Catholic, one non-Catholic. And then I think the most important thing for me is to study ahead, to get as much information ahead as I can, and to prepare. My case, when they call the office for a baptism, the secretary sends them the form in the mail. And then before I schedule the class, it's back. And then I call them on the phone. So I know the mother and the father's faith tradition. And I've had all kinds of, I've had Jehovah's Witness, I've had the Mormons, and just recently I had the Universalist. And I hated the computer, but you know, I've learned to love the computer. All you gotta do is go over there to that one little spot up there and say Universal, and click on go, and you know, you'll learn about the Universal Church. You'll learn about the Mormon Church. And that way, when I meet with them, I already know where they're at. And I was shocked with the Universalists, because you can believe in the Bible if you want to, you can believe in God if you want to. How come we call that a religion?
You only need to believe the person that is in charge of the church.
Yeah, it's not really any kind of religion. So, and I thought, well, how am I going to approach this young man? It was a young man. So, for your experience, okay, just think about those kind of things and how you'll prepare yourselves for the different mixed marriages. Did you have your hand up, Dave?
Well, I was gonna just say, so at St. Joe's, they've asked me to do the baptism, preparation.
Mm-hmm.
But basically,
You could have done it for 20 years, I did. That's where they asked me too.
yeah, that's where it starts, right?
Yeah.
You got big shoes to fill too.
Oh, Father O'Leary.
Well, so, like, I'm not a deacon, so obviously, like, I get things kind of started, but if there's a couple that's, one faith and another one's Catholic, then I communicate with Father Ankley, and he'll, pick up on it and meet with. Yeah, so he says to me, ask if they want. Let's say it's been a marriage through the courts or something. He'll say, ask if they want their marriage blessed, and I'll call them, and I don't really understand. Maybe this is a question of sometime today you can mention, but what does it mean when a priest blesses a marriage, and how do you get, like, is he trying to move the family to have a sacramental marriage? Obviously, I don't, like, to me it's like a gray area.
You're asking me the
Well,
purpose of a radical sanation or convalidation? The reasoning behind it? Is that what you're asking
well,
me?
I think blessing is kind of like a
like when
layman's
he
term.
says I'm gonna, give a blessing, like what?
Yeah.
I guess it's a way for the couple to understand that somehow their marriage is being, noticed or something.
Let me try this and see if it answers the question, because I tried to repeat it to you in a little different way. You've taken a class on marriage, right? And marriage preps and that kind of stuff.
Canon law.
Canon law, there you go, canon law, okay. Then you know who's the really the officiants in the marriage, right?
The couple.
The couple, correct. And we as clergy do what? Witness, okay. So if we're not there, how do we know they gave consent, that they married one another? So that's one thing, is for the deacon or the priest to witness their consent, to witness their marriage. And then in the blessing, just like we did back over there, Deacon Dave gave us a blessing on behalf of the church. It's not Dave doing it, but he's doing it on behalf of the church, and it's the same thing with the deacon and the priest. That's the purpose behind doing. Does that answer your question?
So if he blesses the couple, that's really not, it's really not a marriage where you're gonna write it down and.
Are you
Actually, I think you gotta document, you have to document that date, so they would have 2 marriage dates.
Yeah.
I think, Mike, what I think he's getting at is he's saying, Father just calls you in, let's say you and your wife were married outside the church by the JP, and I think he's thinking that you come in and Father just gives him a blessing.
Oh,
That's not
no,
what
that's not what
He's
happened.
he's asking me to send that names of these folks to him, so it's like.
Well, he'll
I
have
don't
to deal
mind
with
at
the
that point.
radical sanation or with the convalidation if it's outside of the church.
Right.
And then the blessing is, when they're called in for the radical sanation, it's just a verse that's read, and it can go through and there can be an actual blessing over the couple. If it's a convalidation, then the rites are actually, they take the vow, listen to the vows right there.
This is one thing that I've experienced. I just received one the other day from another church. a baptismal certificate from the pastor in another Catholic church, okay? And on the front of it was a little certificate of baptism and the priest or the deacon that did it and the date and the parent's name, the godparent's name, and the child's name. But then on the back was more words. And that was, did they have First Communion? Did they have confirmation? Have they received religious order or holy order? Have those kind, and it states right there on the back of that. So that's important that the Father Ankley would ask for that paper, because if we were married outside the church by the JP, there's no record of any marriage. Okay? And in my case, that's interesting too, and that wasn't so much, that was just the church, the Catholic Church missing me. I was forgotten because I was confirmed when I was 28. And then when I prepared to go into the diaconate classes, it came back from California that I had not received confirmation. But I was confirmed at St. Philip's when I was 28. Somebody didn't send it to San Francisco. So that's important too, because we need to know those kind of things. Because then what happens, Dave, and I hope I'm going too far maybe, I don't know. If you're doing the child's baptism and you find out the parents were married by the JP, we don't know they were even married. We don't know how many times they were married. We know nothing about it. And it's important for us to know that. To know
So
what kind of sacraments they
those
received.
records.
Yep, the church, your secretary will.
Okay, because I don't get into that.
Yeah.
And the flip side is that the secretaries or you have to send this stuff to the parishes. So like when kids are confirmed.
Yeah, and that depends on your pastor too. I should go there too. I've had, I think maybe, I'm not going to count them, but maybe 6 different pastors. You know St. Joe's, and all the
Yeah.
priests that have
Yeah.
passed through, all the associates.
Yeah.
I've had a profound amount of priests that I've worked with, and they all have a little different perspective. I had one priest that said, it's okay, I don't care. You can have 2 Church of England godparents, no biggie to me. Well, that's not right, but I had a pastor say that. He okayed it. And then I had other pastors are pretty strict. So it depends on who you're working with too. But I think for canon law purposes and to protect your own self, remember that one godparent must be a confirmed, practicing Catholic requirement, minimum. And explain that to the parents when you meet with them. Whoever you choose, which typically is a family member or a friend.
Then we need to ask for the baptize of the good parents, or we can ask for the marriage certificate.
I don't ask for any marriage certificates. But there is a spot on there. All right, let's go to the form. Pick up your registration. Do I have one? I should. Here it is. Let's just go through that, okay? The surname, which is their last name,
I have a
Moreno.
question. Before you go down to there, you have at the top the signature of the minister. You do that at the end?
After my baptism, I do that.
Okay.
I don't, that's why I jump right down. Thank you, Tim, for helping me out. Anytime you think of those things, please say something. The surname, the given name, the date of birth, and the place of birth. Okay, that's just the child's information. Here's where you discover about the parents. Father's full name, current religious persuasion, and that's where I've discovered the Mormons and Jehovah's Witness, I think, in those, okay? And it's okay, you just go on by this, thank you, and you go on by. Then you get the mother's full name. Now, I've had some ladies ask, how come you want my maiden name? I'm married. It's important to have the married name because, well, you know our fetish now with genealogy and ancestry. And it's, before the civil governments had records of parents and grandparents and great-great-grandparents, the churches had. And typically, if you start looking at ancestry, you wind up going to the Catholic Church somewhere to find something. So we have that, and that helps there. So that kind of appeases them if you explain it in that way. Says, yes, I recognize you're married. You got 4 kids in front of me. You're married, but this is for records and tracing things back. Of course, the address, telephone, that's all obvious, but here, married by, and that's the discovery of where they were married. If up above he says, yes, I'm Catholic, and she says, yes, I'm Catholic, and they were married in the Honolulu on the beach, the Catholic Church doesn't do that, it's in the church. And if they don't know the minister's name, and I've had all kinds of names there too, a lot of times they don't remember. That's the discovery, and then what I try to do is, at that point, is to lead them into thinking about being married in the Catholic Church as they're Catholics and receive the grace of the sacrament. Without that grace, out that sacrament, they're out there on their own. God's not helping. Well, I won't say that. Now I'm putting God in telling him what to do. But we believe that the grace of the sacrament strengthens our marriage, bestows on us the Holy Spirit. So there's discovery in these questions.
I've done about 5 of them, and I've had 2 that were married, like, one of them was in service,
Okay.
so that's where they were married, and then there was one married, it was like, a lady married him, and I said, well, that's not Catholic. But you learn a lot from doing that.
You do. You learn a lot about the couples, and it's always in love. Please remember that. It's always in love. It doesn't take much. I've had to step back a couple of times on choosing the wrong words that I said. The pastors come to me and said, you upset them, deacon, you said. And even if I was right, it made no difference, I upset them. In my personal experience is sometimes what the priest or the deacon says can affect their path the rest of their life. My mother was married at 16, had me at 17, and was a widow at 18. She was a Methodist and married a Catholic. At 18 years old, she went to the Catholic priest and said, my husband would like to have a funeral in your church. The question the priest asked was, were you married in the Catholic Church? And the Methodist 18-year-old said, no, we weren't. And the priest refused to do the funeral rite for my father. I was never raised Catholic, although I was baptized. My mother never wanted to walk through the door of a Catholic church. My half-brothers and sister, the 2 half-brothers were baptized Catholic, but never saw a church. And the sister has never been baptized. Now, maybe my mother always thought that way, I don't know. Maybe the priest could have been a little bit more loving. I don't know. But it puts me in a spot of always embracing others in love. Because I don't want to stand before Jesus and have him say, how come you did that to John, Mike? I'd rather have him say, well, you were pretty merciful like I was, or like I am. I like that, Mike. You know what I mean? It's about choosing the right words.
One time I received a mother one time that probably 10 years before he lost a baby, and he asked the priest, and the priest said, your son will not go to the heaven because he is not baptized.
Well, you'll see that in the infant baptism papers that I gave you. There's an answer to that in there, and it's just the opposite opinion that priest said. Please choose your words. Please choose your words. Smile and twinkle in the eye.
20 or 30 years ago.
Most pastors require that they be a registered parishioner. The exception is sometimes children grow up at St. Mary Church in Marshall for a lot of years and then they move away. Their parents are still going there and their grandparents are still going there, but they live in Chicago or they live in San Francisco and they want the baptism at St. Mary Church in Marshall. Well, their history is there, so we do it because the family's still there and that's where they grew up. That's the exception to being a registered parishioner.
Baptism is almost like one of the papers that I wrote for the baptisms that we have to do. Father Bill did one, and it reminded me, and I put it in there, almost like the Waltons, of coming home. And with that feeling that we give the parents, that they're home. They were out, now they've come home. It just is so much more warm.
Thank you very much, Phil. That's the truth. That's how we're going to be sitting with that couple right there. Welcome home. That was beautiful. Thank you. Welcome home. Let me bring you into our home and let's celebrate together. Let's grow in our love of Christ and one another together. Beautiful. And now I discover about the godparents. And I say I've been doing this for about 19 years. I don't think 20, but maybe 19. And it wasn't until the last month that I've had so much trouble with godparents. I'm amazed. I even told a couple of people, I said, what's going on? I had a couple, two couples, and it was a challenge. One of them, I said, well, okay, I can, and I learned a lesson here. I've been doing this for all this time. I would schedule the baptism and then wait later for the rest of the information. But this time, it wasn't until 2 days ago, and I'm doing the baptism tomorrow, that I got paperwork on the godparents. Praise the Lord. I don't know how many times I had to call them. I says, I'm not calling them again. It was in my mind. I have a sacristan that helps me with baptism. It's all set up. I don't do nothing, just the baptism. And I was already in my mind that she was going to be my godmother in case something happened tomorrow, because I've called them, texted them, emailed them, nothing coming back. So after all these years, I learned my lesson. No date without full paperwork. Then there was another couple that come in, and I can't remember which child, first child maybe, but the godmother was Catholic. The godfather was Lutheran. So I asked the question. It says on there, is your godparent, father or mother, confirmed practicing Catholic? I don't know. So I said, well, and find out from the godmother. Call her and find out. I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. Days go by, a week go by, 2 weeks go by, no answer. And then finally she called. I think I texted her. She called and said, yeah, she's baptized Catholic, but when she got married to her Lutheran husband in the Lutheran church. And they baptized their 3 children Lutheran. And she's participating fully in the Lutheran church and not doing anything. She's turned her back on the Catholic Church. What about you don't have any godparents? Because neither one of them is Catholic. She's living in the Lutheran church. I won't say she's excommunicated herself. I don't know. But by all physical form, it looks like it, doesn't it? So I had a problem there, and finally, after a long conversation, I said, why don't you have her call me? And I talked to her. And finally I had to, and again, the welcome home attitude, frame of mind, I had to explain to her that neither one of them qualified to be a godparent. And I had to call the mother back and say, you got to choose somebody else. And I haven't heard from them yet. So, and that baptism is, I learned my lesson, that baptism isn't scheduled. They went November 6th, but I have not said anything in the way of yes to them at all on that one, because I've learned my lesson.
We had some people show up at the office at St. John's, and there's a lady and her sister, and they wanted to have their babies baptized. Well, make a long story short, they went to St. Gabriel's, and apparently there was a problem with the godparents, and Father Herman said no to the godparents, that they need different godparents. So they decided to choose a different parish to go to. They didn't realize that Father Herman was our pastor at there.
Yeah, I know that too. And now that, well, one thing is, yes, I do. I just told you that about the Lutherans. I did finally get her convinced, and this was another problem when I was on the phone yesterday to the pastoral center, to Mike Evans. And that is, he was baptized Ukrainian Catholic. And my pastor said, I think I just got something from the bishop saying the Ukrainian. You got to be careful with Ukrainian Catholics. Although they're in communion with us, there's something I got from the bishop's office, so I had to call. And I got the okay that he's okay. The Ukrainian Catholic is still in communion with us. So whatever it is that Father is concerned about, it must be something else. So, what the heck did you just say, Phil? Because there was something else I wanted to comment to that, but I wanted to fill in this.
About them going to different churches.
Yeah, I've had that. Okay, two experiences there is is one, a priest in one parish refused to baptize their child, and I didn't know that, and I went through with it. Now, that pastor at that time was a little bit more on the liberal side. So I went through with the baptism. And you know what I saw in the end? Because I didn't ask enough questions. The baptism was done, and he looked over to his mother, the grandmother, and said, "There, I hope you're happy."
Yeah.
You know what I thought? You're messed up. I should have looked more into that one. So, but when you meet with them, it's really, really important. Really important. You were almost going to be a godfather tomorrow. The problem I have with that, and let me tell you, and I told Father this too, because we were looking into the Ukrainian Catholic, is if I didn't have a Catholic on Sunday, I was going to have the sacristan and possibly Tim, because Tim's helping me tomorrow, be the godparents. But I said, Father, the problem with that is the godparents they chose that aren't on record are going to live with them, and they're going to be the godparents not on paper. And Sharon and Tim are going to be godparents the child's never going to see again. So how does that work? To just choose someone because they're Catholic, and then they never see the child again. It's almost redundant.
This is happening with us.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's a very hard thing.
But this happened with us a lot because
Does it?
most of the couples are not married and their
Yeah.
friends are not married
Yeah.
too, and they choose somebody.
You have a very difficult world. As I know a little bit about it as working with the Spanish-speaking community and with the Burmese, that there's paperwork problems there and it can't be resolved. So my blessings to you. As I know, so it is, we feel very hard.
But
It's all-
is the church trying to figure out a way to work through that so they can be?
Don't they sound like a
Well,
paper and
we're going to baptize a child. Here's another thing to remember too, and this is really important. I wasn't raised Catholic. My mother had wounds from the Catholic Church. But the grace of the sacrament, here I stand before you as an ordained man in the Catholic Church. It was my own personal experience. Not part of baptism. Maybe you'll learn me later at a retreat or some kind of thing. I was a hooligan, but God knocked me to my knees. And I've had priest after priest, person after person, when I talk, say, it's just the grace of the sacrament that you received when you were 3. It was just laid there waiting for the moment. God's Spirit was just waiting there to give me. So trust God. And it's like I said, I don't want to stand before Jesus and have him say, you forgot about Frank, Janine, Francis, and whoever. I'm really glad. You brought 20 people in out of love and mercy, even though they were Catholic. Or maybe they took drugs, maybe whatever. At least you witnessed me to them. I'd rather have him say that. That's where I'm at. Of course, then I got to answer to the pastor or the bishop if I make a boo-boo. David.
So as I'm listening to you, and I can already see areas that I could do a better job with. So for example, and I think part of the, okay, so Father Derrida gets me set up with this, and then Father Ankley comes in, and I don't think looking back, because of that break and Father Ankley coming in with all kinds of stuff, I don't think I never really sat down with anybody really Father Ankley gave me like the idea. So for example, I haven't been asking godparents to join us. Well, nobody really, it was kind of floating out there. So let me tell you something that happened, which I feel bad about, but it's just like, so there was a couple, and then the godfather I was told he's a member of the pairs, blah, blah, blah. So he eventually called. Now the godmother was in another state, and she went, the mother of the baby told her, let me back up. Somebody from our church told them she needs to go to a class, the godmother. So she goes to this church in Pennsylvania, and then I get this email that this deacon gave her a class, okay?
Good.
So then the godfather calls me, and I was assuming he's part of the church, you know, part of our parish and all that, so I didn't call him in for a class. So then, I was trying to set up a time to give him some information. I was gonna give him the booklet, the baptism booklet. So then he says to me on the phone, well, I won't be there Sunday, you know, I'm taking my son out, we're hunting together. And I'm thinking, like, everything's happened so fast, I got off the line, I said, the guy didn't even go to church. Here, you know, I didn't even bring him in for class, I just.
One thing that I have is, and the secretary makes sure I always have an updated list of all the registered parishioners in our parish. And I have that list, so when the appointment is made, I look at that list to see if the parents are parishioners, registered. The second thing I do when I find out about the godparents, or when I talk to the parents first, whenever I can, if the godparents are not parishioners of St. Mary Marshall, I want a letter from their pastor in their church that they are a Catholic in good standing. My pastor requires that. So, and that's how I discovered the Ukrainian Catholic on Thursday, was because the letter came from the pastor of a Ukrainian Catholic church. And I had to scramble that last day to get that figured out. So those are two things I asked for. And then here's something else I wanted to say. Do I need to go any further?
Don't assume anything.
No.
We're glad
Okay,
you went
guys,
further.
we're all grown adults, right?
Yeah. Why was I gonna say it like that?
Don't assume. Don't assume. Okay, I don't want my senior Osborne to see that. Or one of the children. Don't assume. And David, I had it handed me the same way. No instructions at all. It's just, here, Mike, next year you're going to be a deacon. Do it. And then there was pastor changes all the time. And I've just done it a lot of years and experienced a lot of things. And from that experience, I'm at where I'm at. And I'm still making mistakes. There's a couple things I want to show you. We're running.
Mike, one question on the godparent form. I tried that the last baptism I had, gave it to the couple to take to their godparents and get it back. It came back the day of the baptism, and they signed out the top part, the bottom wasn't even filled out.
Yeah.
Do you get anything like that, or do you have to?
Well, this is the one I was running into where I told you that Tim's going to be helping me tomorrow. And I was thinking he's going to be the godparent, and I got to figure out how I'm going to break that to the couples before the baptism. So, and that's where I learned the lesson to make sure that all the paperwork's in first. Just like you've heard the priests and your professors or whoever teach you about marriage, never set a date for marriage until it's all done. Don't even tell them you're going to use a pencil. Just watch the dates. Don't make promises you can't keep. Here's a couple of videos. This is a video I did. It's a new one. I was at St. Joe's for 16 years, and I used the old form. John says he has the old one, the old video. If you buy a new one now, John, if you order a new one,
I've got a new one now.
this is what you get. It's 30 minutes long, and it's superb. It really explains all the responsibilities and obligations of parents, godparents. It explains the, in Espanol too. It explains the water, the oils, the garments, everything, the light, and it has 3 couples there in the church, and Father is telling them the whole thing. It's an excellent video. Sure, you can pass it around if you want to. And then in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be teaching RCIA, and you guys have heard of Symbolon? I'm going to use that in a couple of weeks. It's like Father Barron's series. You've heard of Father Barron's series. This is Symbolon. That's what we have in our church. And this one has the sacraments of baptism. I'm going to use this one when I teach the RCIA in a couple of weeks. So here, there's videos out there for you. Another thing, and David mentioned it, and I'll go down this way and I'll show you first. I give every single couple one of these in Espanol. So you can look at that booklet too. It's from Liguori. And the secretary always, I make sure when I start to rub low to get some more, have her order some more for me.
Mike, you gonna mention anything about preparing for the baptism in the sense of?
Yeah, isn't that, I think I'm gonna do that in the next, I have 2 more to do, right?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, yeah, I was gonna do that, and the next one was getting in more into the baptism itself. This was focused on the class.
I just meant like in preparation, like that there's candles there, so that you don't get to the baptism and not have your stuff.
Oh, yeah, that'll be, at the baptism, I'll talk about all the prep. The things to think about beforehand. Have your book set up and have the candles and all that stuff. I've had questions, there's the questions couples have asked, particularly the Hispanic community at St. Joseph's, because what I've seen from them is little boys showing up in tuxedos, little girls in what looks like wedding dresses. They have their own candles, they have their own shells, they have a beautiful little kit. And I want them to use their own. I think it's wonderful. I really do. But to let them know that we provide that stuff. That's another question, and I should have got that, I missed that off the top, is what do we need to bring? And you tell them, well, we provide for you everything. But if there's something special, sometimes there's clothes that the baby will wear that great-grandpa, great-grandma wore, just handed down to the generations. And I said, wear it, please. It's wonderful. Everything they want to provide. But we
provide the candles?
Candle, yes. The candle,
I don't have any in my church.
You know,
I don't have candles to provide to the baptized.
none? Okay, what churches?
They bring.
They bring? Oh, well, of course, I'm thinking about, that explains, as I explained, they bring their own, so yes, yeah. But when starters, you get the Anglos, then that's less of that. I haven't seen an American bring one. It's always the Colombians, the Mexicans, Puerto Rico, and you know, they bring their own.
And we are tell the people, take care of this candle, and every year, that when you have the birthday, turn on the candles and.
Yeah, I do, and I'll do that in my homily sometimes, because it's to say that, and also to explain to them that it's a birthday. Celebrate it as a birthday because it's a rebirth. The church teaches that. That's part of the class too, is to teach them. The class teaches them, the video teaches history and theology as well, what we understand of it. So it's a good video.
Mike, why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Okay, I've been watching the clock, yeah. What do you want, John?
I'll talk to you during break.
Okay. So I hope I answered your questions. It wound up being a question and answer thing. I don't even know if I followed my notes, but that's okay. That's what I wanted us to do. It's just to let you know my experiences.
John doesn't think we exist back here.
I went over there.
I know.
Yeah. Did it wrong.
Both of them.
Now, everybody brought their book? Did everybody bring it back?
Yeah.
Here, Alberto,
No,
I got 2 of them.
you see? That's probably the 2 ones. By me?
I got 2 of them.
Oh, you got 2 of them? Okay. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I wonder.
I don't think they've changed though.
No, actually,